a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Marin Oslak. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay! Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. This is Stephanie, and I'm here with Marin, and I'm going to start with a little question. Have you ever hung on to something that you know is not good for you? A habit, a belief, maybe even a relationship or a job that you go, this sucks, but I can't seem to let it go.
Yeah, I know I have.
Yeah, yeah, me too. It might even be physical weight. Like when you think of weight loss, I always say, you don't want to lose weight. You want to like not lose it because you're going to start looking for it again. So you want to lighten up. But I find myself too, I'll hang on to weight because it gives me permission to feel protected or feel safe or like it's
Yeah.
really interesting. And why I'm saying that is that, we tend to look at the physical, the outer world for its answer. Like if only my husband was like kinder, and if only my job paid me more money, and if only
Right.
I could lose like 20 pounds, and if only, right? Well, what if that was your scrawny cow? And it wasn't about the outer, it's about the inner. And when I say scrawny cow, I'm going to tell you a little
Yeah.
story
I
about
know.
scrawny.
You're gonna need to explain to them what you mean by what
Yeah,
if that's your scrawny
yeah, I'm going to
scrawny
tell you
cow.
about the scrawny cow because we all have one.
Yes.
And so
Like
yeah,
I was gonna say, for me, it's usually an idea that I have about a belief that I've carried from my past that is so fundamental to the way that I live. I don't even, it's like the air that I'm in, the air that I breathe, or like a fish who, it's just the water that the fish lives in. And it's like, that's way that it's an assumption that I make about life of like, well, yeah, whatever, for me, oftentimes it is around money or a
mhm,
job or what my own self-worth or value, like I'm only worth this amount. And I think, oh, if I could only make X amount more. Well, I will never be able to do that until I let go of the belief that I'm only worth this amount.
exactly. So it's like if I want to have health, and I don't just mean physical health, but mental health, emotional health, whatever kind of health, say I want to be in really great shape. I'm going to have some behavioral changes. I can't just like close my eyes and visualize it. That does help. It does help, but I have to make an internal change. Often we think, well, Stephanie, go to the gym, work out, you know, eat differently. And those things all help, but I also have to make an internal change, meaning
Like
I
at a
have to see
belief level.
yes, like I
Yeah.
have to believe I can do it. I have to believe that there's a reason why that motivationally, like that I'm safe and that in losing or lightening up, I'm going to have more energy. I have to let go of the belief that I'm too old or unlovable. Like
Mhm.
there's so many I say it's like a weed. When you pull a weed in the garden and it has, have you ever taken a weed out and you think it's just a little one and you keep pulling it and it's like going and going and going and it has all these different side roots to it and you're like, oh mother of God, this freaking weed is like going forever. Well, that's what goes on with our internal too. There's a lot of things that need to be swept out.
Mm.
And so I call those the scrawny cows.
Tell us why.
So there's a story, it's a true story of the Baal Shem Tov, who was a Jewish rabbi. And one day, the Baal Shem Tov was with his students and they were passing through a small village and they knocked on the door of a farmer and his wife. And the farmer and the wife had just barely enough. Like they had a good life. They were happy. It's a good life. They had everything they needed. Not over in abundance and not too little, just right. Kind of the
Just
Goldilocks.
enough.
Just enough.
I
And
can I can relate to that. Like
right.
I get
Yeah.
I know that feeling of like, oh, I have just enough. I'm good.
Yeah, just enough love, just enough time, just enough energy, just enough health, just enough freedom, like just enough, whatever it is. Anyway, so the Baal Shem Tov knocks on the door, and the farmer answers the door, and he knows right away who the Baal Shem Tov is. And he's like, it'd be like the Dalai Lama showing up at your door, knocking on the door, and saying, "Hey, do you mind if I come in and have something to eat?" I mean, that's what it would be like. So the Baal Shem Tov knocks on the door. The farmer opens the door. He's like, holy cow! There's the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov said, "Look, myself and my students, we've been traveling for a while. We're hungry. Would you be so kind to make us a meal so that we can, be satisfied, like have something to eat?" And of course, the farmer says, "Absolutely, absolutely, no problem." Goes back to his wife and says, "Oh my gosh, the Baal Shem Tov's here. We don't have anything to give him. What are we going to give him?" And without even thinking thoroughly through anything, they decide to sell their scrawny cow. That's all they have is a scrawny cow. So he takes it quickly to market, sells the cow, comes back with a whole bunch of vegetables and things to cook. And his wife makes the most amazing meal from all the food. And the Baal Shem Tov sits down and he eats and he eats and he eats and he eats. And like not just one plateful, but two platefuls. Like he just keeps eating until there's not a morsel left. Essentially, he eats them out of house and home. I think that's where that saying comes from. He ate them out of house and home. And as soon as the last little piece was done, he looked to his students. He said, "Okay, we are done here. Thank you so much for your hospitality. You've been so kind and so generous. We'll be on our way." Baal Shem Tov leaves, and the farmer literally breaks down. He's like, "We have nothing. We basically sold our very food. We sold the scrawny cow. We have nothing. I don't even know what we're going to do. We're destitute." And so he goes outside into his backwoods behind his house, and he gets on his hands and knees and he starts to pray. His heart is broken. He is in surrender mode. He is vulnerable. And he's just saying to God, like, "Please, what do I do? I need guidance. I don't." He starts to pray for all the things that he never has ever asked for. And he starts to pray not only for himself, but he starts to pray for his wife, for all the things that she never asked for, and how he wished he could have given it to her. And as his heart is breaking, he hears over on the side a little rustle in the trees. And he looks up and there's a man staggering in the woods, and he's clutching his heart, so to speak. And he's staggering, and the farmer goes over to him and he says, "Oh my gosh, you're sick, you're ill. Please come back. We'll look after you. All you need is like, a nice place to lie down and rest, and we'll care for your needs." And the man says, "No, no, no, no. I've come out here to die. I've made a lot of money in my life, and my family really doesn't care about me. My children just are waiting for me to die so they can have my money. They're ungrateful. They're horrible." He said, "So I tricked them and I buried it. And I have the map here in my pocket." And he said, "But you have been so kind and so generous. I want to give this to you." And as he reaches in his pocket and he gives the farmer the map, he dies in the farmer's arms. So some time passes, and Baal Shem Tov is coming through the small village again, and as he and his students are walking on the roadside, this stately carriage goes by, and the farmer and the wife waving away at the Baal Shem Tov, saying, "Hi, how are you?" They're so happy. And the students say to the Baal Shem Tov, it's like, "Isn't that the farmer and his wife that we ate at a house and home?" And the Baal Shem Tov, "Yes, for God's sake, I had to eat them out of house and home so they would let go of that scrawny cow, because Spirit wanted to give them so much more. God wanted to give them so much more than what they were able to say yes to. So he
because they
had them,
had just enough.
they had just enough, but I had to break his heart so that he would go out and pray from the depth of his soul for what he truly, truly was wanting and longing for." And I think that's the real true message, is like, so often we have to wait until something horrible happens that wakes us
Mm,
up, the pain
yeah,
and suffering, right? Instead of that joy and inspiration of like, what is it that, and it's not about that you're not enough unless you keep going and doing and reaching that high level achiever. It's not that. It's more of like asking a different question of like, what does the universe want from me?
So it's interesting when you say that because for myself, I have more than enough. I have like an abundance
Mhm.
in my life. And yet I still identify with that farmer and his scrawny cow because there is this, it feels like I'm only ever just enough. It's just enough. I need to do more. I have to have more. I have to,
Mhm.
like, there's this more thing that happens. And I think that when you were saying, like, we can shift that paradigm from a place of drama and trauma, of something happens and everything goes away. You hear about the people who lost their job and lost their husband and lost their, whatever, their spouse, their kid, like
Mhm.
something horrific happens. And that does, it like puts us into a complete surrender, like, I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
Or we can take the lessons of these things like this, like the story of the Baal Shem Tov, where that is a story so that I can step out of my own way and recognize that there is so much more for me.
Mhm.
And it comes from a different perspective. If I keep the same perspective, I have my scrawny cow, I have just enough, and I'm very happy, and that's all true. And there's this other perspective that's like, there is so much more waiting for me.
Yeah.
That's calling me, and I can step into it from a place of joy and inspiration.
Yeah, and what the essence of that story is that what opens your heart?
Mm.
What, because it's learning how to open your heart bigger, because that's actually what meant is meant to be evolving, is our heart space, our capacity to both give and receive is actually meant. So if we're basing it just on the capacity of giving, it's like, I'm not giving enough, I'm not doing enough, but maybe you're not opening your heart enough to also receive enough. And so
Yeah.
we can kind of get caught in that struggle of lack and scarcity, instead of like and that can be our ego of like identifying that, "Oh, I've got to do more. I'm not doing enough," or, "Oh, I need more. I don't have enough support in my life." But really that story is about what opens your heart, because it's actually all right here, right now. Like you but as Brené Brown often speaks of, is the art of vulnerability. It's like we've been told that being vulnerable is weak, and it takes extraordinary amount of courage to be vulnerable. Trusting in ourselves, trusting the unknown, trusting the person you're talking to. It takes so much strength. So it's a misnomer to say that it's a weakness. Hell no, it's a strength. And it's the same as surrender. We say, "Oh, well, surrender must mean you're giving up." He surrendered. The farmer surrendered to the unknown and went out and got on his hands and knees and asked, "I need help. I'm willing." And help showed up in the staggering man that was buried in his fortune. It was right there all along. But he wouldn't have heard it if his heart was not open. If his heart was closed, he wouldn't have been in the backwoods in the first place. But even if he was in the backwoods and his heart was closed, he wouldn't have heard the call to help. That it was right there.
I think this
So
is so
yeah.
often why we hear about, like people who are super successful and yet feel completely empty. And
Mhm.
they wake up one day and they're like in a prison of their own making, right? Of like, I
A well
created this.
decorated, beautiful prison, but it's a prison.
Exactly. It's like I
Like
created this
Al
success.
Capone in Alcatraz, he did a lot of work in his prison, like, he still had a lot of perks. It's like
Right.
all of us can have a prison of our mind, a prison of our heart that stops us from really going for a dream. And not that it's meant to have more money or have more time or energy, but it's what you're being called to become.
Yeah. And that call, it's so interesting because when I work with some of my clients, it's like they want to try and figure it out from their head.
Mhm,
And that call comes from beyond our thinking brain. It really literally. So one of the things that science is finding is has found is that the neurons that make up our brain, we have some of those very same neurons in our heart. So we have a second brain in our heart that communicates to our brain. And one of the interesting things, I always found this interesting, the ancient cultures that embalmed people that like made
Mm.
mummies, the only part of the body that they threw away was the brain
Isn't that
because
fascinating?
it was fascinating. They believed that they were coming back and that they needed everything except for the brain because they were going to get the up-leveled version, right?
Yeah, our brain is essentially our computer. So
It
it's like, why
is,
would you be like walking around with an old computer from the 1950s when you
right?
can get the upgraded faster? It's like internet, the same sort of thing. Is like we're always getting faster and faster, and now this whole pull towards AI, which is neither right or wrong or good or bad, but it's like, where is our place as a human being on this planet? And that is the difference between AI and a human being is the heart, the soul.
Yeah. And
It's like,
so
yeah, we're here
we
for a
tend
reason.
to defer to, we've idealized and we've deferred to this like higher form of thought. We think of what our brain does as a higher form of thought. And really, in what they're finding, and this is what the mystics have told us for years, and science is now proving that the higher form of thought actually comes from our heart. And
Mhm,
that longing that I was talking about, that where like people get to that very high level of success and then they feel empty, it's because they've been only using their brain up here instead of dropping 12 inches into their hearts and connecting into their hearts. So when I hear that story about the Baal Shem Tov and like he was they took he had to take it away the scrawny cow so that the farmer could drop into his real knowing, which
mhm.
was in his heart. And that's so critical for us. And like you said, that longing that we have, the thing that's calling us of where, what am I here to do? That comes from our heart. Now, it's not going to come through our CPU, right? The
Yeah,
computer brain, right? It's the software behind it. It's not the hardware. So yeah, I absolutely love that story, and I've heard it a couple times this week, and I'm so glad that you shared it with us.
yeah, I've been so contemplating that myself because we get
Hmm.
conditioned to,
Habituated.
we get programmed, we program ourselves that this is the only way it's gonna be.
Hmm.
And we might have a dream or a longing or a desire, and it's what stands between that dream, longing, and desire and where you are now is the scrawny cows.
Hmm.
There's probably a few of them, like the
Yes.
weed, there's probably gonna be scrawny cows. And, my suggestion would be is, like, even if you are open to looking at one of the scrawny cows, I'm pretty sure it'll be attached to many, which means you can just look at one scrawny cow, and as you start to work with that scrawny cow to be able to let it go, you're going to actually have to become a different person in
Hmm.
order to let that go. That's what happens. And I think that's what's can be scary sometimes because you're like, well, why do I have to change?
Yeah.
Why do I have to change? Why can't they change? Right.
The ironic thing, I love it when you say that because the ironic thing is when I change, they do change.
Right. They're not, yeah. How often have we lived, like you meet somebody and you're like, wow, I don't even live in the same reality as you do. Where are
Right.
you coming from? What are you listening to? What are you paying attention to? And if we get into that kind of mishmash, and that's what it is, it's exhausting versus looking at, well, what kind of world or what kind of life do I want to live into? And that's going to require me to change. I need to take responsibility.
So I think this is so key because we both mentioned earlier that it's like somebody can come along and rip that scrawny cow away from us, and it will be dramatic and traumatic, and
Mhm.
could potentially lead to a lot of really great things, like it did for the farmer. The other option is for us to be proactive and look at it from a higher place. And
Yes.
that's really how, if you want to wake up through joy and inspiration, instead of having somebody else come along and rip the scrawny cow away, that's the path. So looking inside and saying, what are my scrawny cows? Like
Mhm.
I would love to just become aware of one of them in a kind and loving way so that I can start to work with that.
And I think, in order to even know that you have a scrawny cow, it's helpful to then look at what is beautiful to me. What is it that I want to live into my life?
Mm.
Because if you haven't got something that is outside of your comfort zone right now, because that's it, like somebody will come to me and say, I got the diagnosis of cancer, and I'll say, What is your dream? What is your hope? Is your wish?" And it's like, "Well, I just don't want to have cancer anymore."
Mm.
Like they're still focusing, which to me, cancer is a scrawny cow, by the way. You know, I just don't want to have that. And I said, "Well, if the cancer was gone, who would you be?" "Well, I'd be the same person."
Mm.
No, you wouldn't. I can guarantee you wouldn't be the same person. And it's like you'll be somebody who doesn't have cancer. That's a different person. So why I'm saying cancer is a scrawny cow, it could be anything. It could be the heartbreak of losing a loved one. It could be, or losing a job, or losing money, or losing your health in some other way, a function of a body part. You're not as young as you used to be. And it's like, well, what are you believing? What is it that you really want? What would health, and I don't just mean physical health, look like, or feel like, or be like? It's going to require a mental health, and it's going to require an emotional health and a spiritual health. Because otherwise, if you just do the surface aspect of the physical health, it doesn't have any roots. It doesn't have any longevity. This is why things come back. It's like if you go into deeper into the unknown, into that internal world of yourself, and you start looking at the mental health and the emotional health and the spiritual health, now you're drawing roots down there so that when the hurricanes come or the storms of your life come, it's not going to knock you over or break you in half. You've got roots. And by the way, those roots, and this is true in nature, root system actually wind into other root systems. There's
Yes.
a whole community and a network under the ground that we don't even see. And so that's what we're as soulful leaders looking at doing, is going beneath the ground, beneath the surface, creating those root systems and connecting in with other roots as well, other trees, other humans. And it's like coming together, because that way we stand strong.
Mm.
And when I let go of my scrawny cow, I give permission for you, Marin, to let go of your scrawny cow. It empowers us. It's like, wow, if she can do it, so can I.
It does. And that's one of the reasons that we even have the Soulful Leader movement and the podcast and the project and all the things that we're doing is because community is so important like that. And the people that you surround yourself with, they can uplift you or they can bring you down. And so if you don't have a community that is uplifting you, come join us, and bring great people along with you and
Yeah,
struggling people along with you, right? Because
let's create a movement.
we're about what is that highest uplift that we can all step into to empower each other, especially today. Oh my gosh, we really need that. So
We
yeah,
sure
we
do.
would love to hear from you about your scrawny cow, and you can find us online at the Soulful Leader on both Facebook and LinkedIn, and you can also email us anytime. We've got two websites, the soulfulleaderpodcast.com, where you can list all the podcasts, and the Soulful Leader Project, where you can join our movement and bring
Yeah.
your own momentum and join our
And if you
momentum.
want help
Mm.
finding your scrawny cow, because sometimes that's hard too, we have
Yeah.
lots of wonderful things coming up. So join in with us so that we can let you know what's coming up to really help you and really
Yeah.
serve you.
And we never spam you. So join our email list. You'll get a cool free download and then you'll get to hear from us once in a while. Excellent. Thank you so much. And we will see you all in a couple weeks on the Soulful Leader podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
And Marin Oslac. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.